Over the weekend, security forces are battling terrorists on multiple fronts, operating inside Syria, Lebanon, Gaza, and Judea and Samaria, while moving toward concrete steps to prevent Iranian nuclearization. We open in Syria, where the Air Force continues pounding remnants of the Syrian armed forces, and the IDF prepares for winter on the Syrian Golan. ILTV's Steve Leibowitz has the latest.
Overnight and through the weekend, the Israeli Air Force attacked remaining military sites in Syria. Over the past week, Israel had said that it destroyed about 80% of the Syrian military's arsenal of chemical weapons, missiles, air defense, Air Force, and Navy in a bid to prevent the arms from falling into the hands of hostile elements since rebels routed the al-Assad regime just over a week ago. The weekend efforts appeared aimed at completing the job. The IDF reportedly struck 6 military bases and warehouses in Latakia. They hit rocket depots deep under a mountain in the Damascus countryside. Defense Minister Katz said he's ordered the IDF to prepare to stay atop the Syrian side of Mount Hermon during the coming winter months to prevent the border region from falling into the wrong hands. Rebel leader al-Jolani spoke about the Israeli strikes for the first time. Jolani said that Israel should have no more excuses for carrying out airstrikes in Syria. Jolani told a Syrian TV channel that the recent Israeli attacks on Syrian soil have crossed red lines and threaten unjustified escalation in the region. The IDF entrenchment on the Syrian Golan includes a number of Druze villages. Videos on social media show village leaders on the Syrian side speaking in favor of being annexed by Israel. They issued an appeal to the Druze villages on the Israeli side of the Golan to help them become part of Israel, free from injustice and oppression.
In a significant diplomatic push, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken traveled and met with key regional players in the Middle East, including Jordan and Turkey. The focus of his trip was a post-Assad Syria and handling of broader challenges of stability and counterterrorism in the region. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken met with Jordan's King Abdallah and the Jordanian foreign minister on Thursday. The talks centered on shaping an inclusive transition in Syria after the fall of Bashar al-Assad, whose regime ended after over 5 decades of family rule. The overthrow was led by the rebel group Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, marking a swift conclusion to a 13-year civil war. Now, the Biden administration is working to rally support for principles it hopes will guide Syria's future.
We're very focused on Syria, very focused on the opportunity that now is before us and before the Syrian people to move from out from under the shackles of Bashar al-Assad to a different and better future for the Syrian people, one that the Syrian people decide for themselves. And we talked about how Turkey, how the United States, how other partners in the region can support those efforts.
Jordan has long been a key U.S. ally in the region, and the discussions held focused on stability and counterterrorism efforts as Syria enters a new phase. From Jordan, Blinken headed to Ankara, where he met with the Turkish President Erdogan and the foreign minister. Talks addressed shared concerns, including the need to counter the resurgence of ISIS and resolve ongoing clashes in the country's north.
We also discussed the imperative of continuing the efforts to keep ISIS down. Our countries worked very hard and gave a lot over many years to ensure the elimination of the territorial caliphate of ISIS, to ensure that that threat doesn't rear its head again, and it's imperative that we keep at those efforts.
Blinken's agenda extended beyond Syria. In Ankara, he emphasized the need for Hamas to accept a Gaza ceasefire agreement. Blinken said progress on this front is crucial to ending the ongoing violence in the region. As the Biden administration nears its final days, Secretary Blinken's Middle East tour demonstrates the urgency of U.S. efforts to manage the fallout from Assad's downfall and concern for the wider regional instability. And joining us now to discuss all of this is Jonathan Conricus, a senior fellow at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies and a former IDF spokesperson. Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you for having me.
Israel is still striking Syrian military targets, and the rebels' leader is now speaking up to say that enough is enough. There's no more justification for the Israeli strikes. What might the Israeli response be to that, do you think?
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure that it's for him to say. I think that Israel will have to determine that based on Israeli intelligence and based on the threat that can emanate from Syria. I am positively surprised so far by the messaging and the PR campaign coming out of HTS, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, and Jawlani, where they have been less hostile towards Israel than what I have heard them speak in the more distant past. And that's a positive thing. However, I think that we shouldn't be confused or misguided by PR efforts, and we should keep our eyes on the prize and make sure that Israelis are kept safe and that Israeli territorial integrity is safe. And as such, we should minimize the chances of these weapons falling into the very wrong hands of terrorist organizations. And that is what Israel is doing. And I think Israel will continue to do so until the job is done, whether Jawlani likes it or doesn't like it.
Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz asserted that the IDF will be on the Syrian Golan through the winter months to ensure that hostile forces do not enter a vacuum. So he's signaling Israel will be there for months. A new semi-permanent front line inside Syria. What do you think is the rationale behind this, and was this the best option?
Yeah, I think it's, in strategy, it's always a choice between imperfect options. And I think this was a relatively good development from an Israeli perspective. It's very important early on to establish red lines and to establish lines of defense and to have bargaining cards. And I think that's what Israel did. Early on, made sure that there wouldn't be any jihadi terrorists approaching the Israeli border and getting within striking distance of Israeli communities on the Golan. And that's super important and the most important thing. And second, this puts Israel in a good position to bargain and to deal with the future leaders of Syria when the situation there will establish itself and we'll have more understanding of who really is in charge and, more importantly, what their posture towards Israel will be. So I think that holding on to the Syrian peak of the Hermon is very important. Israel cannot allow that area to fall into the hands of Hezbollah, of jihadi organizations, or the Syrian military, however that will be in the future, and it needs to hold on to it in a preemptive position. And winter is here, winter is coming, and that's an additional challenge. But I think that that is the right thing for Israel to do, and to signal to the newly forming entities in Syria that Israel is going to be strong, vigilant, and have a policy of absolutely no nonsense when it comes to events happening close to our border.
So if things work out really well, could you see a time in the not too distant future when Syria has no relations with Hezbollah and Iran, has positive ties with the US, and normalized relations with Israel, or is this a dream?
Well, dreams are important, and we should, set visions forward, and we should aspire for positive things, for the future safety and strength of the state of Israel, and for prosperity in the region. And while I want to be an optimist, I think that we have to be realistic here. When I look at the people who are now in control over Syria, these are jihadists. These are people that are just one notch away from full jihadi extremism in the forms of ISIS and Al-Qaeda. So I am not overly optimistic that this iteration of Syrians will establish diplomatic ties with Israel and normalize ties. Maybe in the future, maybe after one or two elections, maybe when the free Syrian people will understand that the only thing that can happen with regards to normalization with Israel is prosperity and peace and stability and options for the future for them, for the future of their children, then maybe they will see things in a different way and reach out towards Israel. I think if and when they do, they will find an Israel that is willing, interested, and capable in building those bridges of peace, which are mutually beneficial, and it will promote stability in the region. And I think that lots of other countries in the world will support it. But I don't think that it is something that we should be hope or think that will happen in the really imminent future, but maybe in a few years, once the situation there settles, let's aim for that and let's make it into reality.
Jonathan Conriquez, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Israel is reportedly using the opportunity of the downfall of the al-Assad regime to try to locate the Syrian burial place of the legendary Mossad spy Eli Cohen. ILTV's Devo Klein has more.
Lebanese media reports say that Israel has been trying to gather intel on the Syrian burial place of Eli Cohen, the most famous spy in Israeli history. Between 1961 and 1965, Cohen transferred high-level information compromising Syrian intelligence. According to the reports, Israel reached out to officials and private citizens in Syria to try to locate the grave and retrieve the body. Cohen had infiltrated into the highest level of Syrian leadership before he was caught and hanged in Damascus in 1965. Syria has long refused to return the body to Israel for burial. His body was reportedly moved multiple times to prevent Israel from locating the burial site. The IDF is also reportedly seeking information on the whereabouts of the bodies of IDF soldiers Zvi Feldman and Yehuda Katz. They were both declared missing after the Battle of Sultan Yaqub with Syrian forces in Lebanon in 1982.
U.S. National Security Advisor was in Israel, where he met with Prime Minister Netanyahu and other officials in an effort to reach a ceasefire and hostage deal. ILTV's Ariella Lachiani is at Tel Aviv's Hostage Square. Ariella, what can you tell me about the hostage deal developments?
Yes, thank you, Sivan. So U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan has wrapped up a series of high-level talks in Jerusalem, signaling a cautious optimism on a ceasefire and hostage deal. Following his meeting with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Sullivan stated that a breakthrough is very much possible as long as both sides show a political will. Now, the current proposal, which has been moderated by Egypt and Qatar, aims for a phased release of the hostages, with at least 100 hostages still being held by Hamas in Gaza, several of them being American citizens. And Hamas has recently actually submitted a list of hostages that they are prepared to release. However, uncertainty remains around its completeness. And meanwhile, here in Israel, of course, tensions continue to mount with protests in Tel Aviv demanding swift action to secure the release of the hostages.
And with the discussions ongoing, what do we know about the key sticking points holding up a broader agreement?
Right, so one of the obstacles is if the ceasefire will be permanent or temporary. Israel is, of course, pushing for a phased approach to ensure its security, whilst Hamas wants more comprehensive guarantees. There's also ongoing uncertainty around the list which has been released by Hamas, and this has raised questions about the accuracy and transparency of Hamas's commitment. Now, Sullivan remains focused on the current framework, which aims to secure immediate releases as well as more humanitarian aid, though, of course, it seems and it's clear that progress is definitely being made. Any agreement still hangs in delicate balance.
Thank you very much, Ariella. Israeli forces were in action on multiple fronts over the weekend. Anti-terror operations are underway in Judea and Samaria. In Gaza, a terror cell was intercepted, possibly en route to an attack inside Israel. And in Lebanon, the IDF continues to hit rocket launchers aimed at Israel. ILTV's Steve Leibowitz has a roundup.
Starting in Lebanon and due to the Israeli airstrikes and the fall of al-Assad, Hezbollah has lost its supply route through Syria. Hezbollah leader Naim Qassem admitted that the terror group does not yet know if the route will be renewed under the new rebel government. Naim also warned Syria not to normalize relations with Israel. Meanwhile, inside Lebanon, the Air Force attacked loaded and ready to launch missiles that were aimed at Israel in violation of the ceasefire agreement. Troops operating inside South Lebanon found weapons including Cornet missiles, RPGs, rifles, and anti-tank launchers that were camouflaged in wooded areas. The northern border remained calm with no incoming rocket fire as the 60-day Israel-Lebanon ceasefire continues to hold. Day 436 of the war in Gaza, the IDF prevented a possible terror infiltration attempt from Gaza. The airstrike hit a cell of operatives on the way to carry out an attack against Israeli forces and toward Israeli territory. The army said the group was at a school in Gaza City when struck. The Air Force attacked weapons depots in areas where terrorists were operating. 2 rocket launches were detected toward Ashkelon that fell harmlessly in open areas. The terrorists had fired from next to an international aid warehouse. Prior to the attack, steps were taken to reduce chances of harming civilians. ground troops continue to operate in Jabalia and Beit Lahia. They located dozens of launchers aimed toward Israeli communities on the Gaza border. The Security Cabinet met to consider steps after a series of terror attacks and attempts in Judea and Samaria. This after a shooting attack killed a 12-year-old boy in the Etzion block, a car ramming attack in Judea, and gunfire targeting worshippers at Joseph's tomb in Nablus in Samaria. And there was an unusual incident over the weekend. Palestinian Authority security forces killed an Islamic Jihad commander in Jenin. He was identified as Yazid Jesa. The PA appears to be trying to reassert itself in an area where they lost control over the years.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has issued a rare and direct message to the people of Iran, expressing solidarity with their aspirations for freedom. In a video released by his office, Netanyahu voiced hope for a brighter future for Iran while continuing to criticize its regime.
Speaking in English with Persian subtitles, Prime Minister Netanyahu addressed the people of Iran and emphasized the enduring bond between the Iranian and Israeli people, despite decades of hostility between their governments. Referencing ongoing protests against the Iranian regime, Netanyahu praised the courage of Iranian citizens fighting for freedom. He expressed hope that one day Iran would be free from what he called the oppressive dictatorship of its leadership.
Israel wants peace. We want peace with all those who truly want peace with us. And I have no doubt that you, the people of Iran, know this. I know that just as we want peace with you, you want peace with us. But you suffer under the rule of a regime that subjugates you and threatens us. You know what this regime is truly terrified of? It's terrified of you, the people of Iran. And one day, I know that. One day this will change. One day Iran will be free. Women, life, freedom, zan, zandagi, azadi. That is the future of Iran. That is the future of peace.
While extending an olive branch to the Iranian people, Netanyahu maintained sharp criticism of Iran's current regime, accusing it of spreading terror and pursuing nuclear ambitions. The Israeli Prime Minister's remarks come as former U.S. President Donald Trump is reportedly weighing aggressive measures to prevent Iran from obtaining nuclear weapons. According to reports, Trump considered options ranging from increased sanctions to preemptive strikes against Iranian nuclear facilities, underscoring the high stakes of Tehran's nuclear program. This echoes Netanyahu's warnings about the global threat posed by a nuclear-armed Iran.
Joining us now is Dr. Mordechai Kedar of Bar-Ilan University. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
With the Syrian regime's collapse and the growing instability in the region, do you believe this might be the right moment for Israel to consider a preemptive strike on Iran's nuclear facilities?
Well, there is no real connection between instability in Syria, for example, or in Lebanon, and the ability of Israel to attack in Iran. Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Iran are in most cases without any air defense. And this is the most important point, not the instability.
The fall of the Syrian regime, could this create opportunities or risks for Israeli military actions?
First of all, this is an opportunity to the Syrians to maybe divide the country into homogeneous parts, like Alawi country in the west, a Kurdish country in the east, a Druze country in the south, and let everyone enjoy his own life without the oppression of the central regime as it was in Syria and might be if Syria remains in one piece.
If Israel were to strike Iran now, what do you think the immediate and long-term consequences would be?
Well, the consequence will be that Iran will be more weakened, and once the regime in Iran is viewed as weakened, maybe this will be the time for the masses to stream to the street in order to kick it out. And an airstrike on the regime's facilities might definitely push it to the abyss.
Do you believe there are still viable diplomatic options to curb Iran's nuclear ambitions, or we're at an end when it comes to diplomacy?
There was never such an option, and of course there is not such an option now. They always conned the world, they cheated. There was never any diplomatic way how to prevent them. they were marching forward in the nuclear program in spite of all the negotiations, in spite of all the agreements. And unfortunately, the world, especially the Western world, who doesn't understand anything in the Middle East, fell in this pit time and again.
President-elect Trump also mentioned preemptive strikes against Iranian nuclear sites as a possibility. And so is it possible at all that the U.S. will back Israel on striking Iran or even do it themselves?
Any strike on Iran from whatever direction comes, it will be blessed strike because it will bring more peace and stability to the world. Because Iran is the main instigator of instability and terrorism all over the world, not only in the Middle East. So if really the world, the civilized world, wants to get rid of instability and terrorism, it should start with Iran.
And so in your opinion, if, say, Israel were to strike Iran tomorrow, would the U.S. back Israel in this move?
After January 20th, I think that the White House will be much more friendly with Israel, especially on this question.
Dr. Mordechai Kedar, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Sky News Australia has parted ways with prominent anchor Erin Molan following widespread criticism of her outspoken support for Israel over the past year and since October 7th. Molan, who is neither Jewish nor Israeli, is known for her bold and unapologetic style as she stood firm in defending Israel's right to self-defense amid the ongoing war against Hamas in Gaza. Her coverage highlighted the complex realities of the conflict, including the role of terrorism and the impact on Israeli civilians, which she argued was often overlooked in international reporting. Despite her efforts to provide a perspective often marginalized in global media, Molan faced significant backlash from some viewers and activists who accused her of bias and insensitivity toward Palestinians. Critics targeted her social media posts and on-air comments, which condemned Hamas while calling for more nuanced reporting on the region. Supporters, however, praised her for speaking truth to power and challenging what they saw as double standards in media narratives about Israel. Sky News stated that Molan's dismissal was a business decision, though many speculate the move was influenced by the controversies surrounding her stance on Israel. And I want to say, Erin, your bravery in reporting the truth about Israel has not gone unnoticed. As a fellow anchor and journalist here in Israel, I want to tell you that your courage and unwavering commitment to presenting the realities of this region are truly inspiring. In a world where reporting on Israel often invites disproportionate criticism, you stood tall and spoke with integrity. You're a role model for journalists everywhere who strive to tell the truth, no matter the personal or professional cost. We deeply appreciate your voice and your work, and I wish you nothing but success and strength in the next chapter of your career. Now let's take a look at the weather forecast. It's getting colder in Israel as tonight's temperatures should reach lows of around 7 degrees Celsius or 44 degrees Fahrenheit, expected alongside clear skies. Tomorrow, more clear skies and cold weather are expected as temperatures should reach highs of 20 degrees Celsius or 67 degrees Fahrenheit. That's a wrap for today's news. For the latest updates from Israel on all your devices, be sure to follow our ILTV channels, subscribe to our newsletter, and explore our website, iltv.tv. Stay informed with the latest news straight from the heart of Israel. I'm Sivan Raviv. Be well, be safe, and thank you so much for watching.